Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're discussing the Ukrainian refugee crisis and what the Canadian government is doing or failing to do to help Ukrainian refugees. Now, Larissa, about 12,000 people have already arrived in Canada from Ukraine. Once they get here, what community supports are available to them? Sabine had mentioned that there is in the short term, at least, there has been a lack of health care provided for people who are arriving from Ukraine. Are there economic supports? Where are people staying once they get here? Is it relying on people's families if you have Ukrainian family? And what about people who don't have family in Canada who are arriving?
Yeah, so I'll back up a little bit and talk about how you can get here. When Andy brought up the biometric scans, that is the most cumbersome part of the process. And you need to have a permanent address or a secure address to where you are. This is important because if you've already done your biometric scans in the last 10 years, although I think they've only had them for about 2 years, you can come without doing that. Most of those people are people who've been to Canada before, who have family somewhere to come. So of those 9,000 people that are already here, most of them have familial ties to Canada. So they're coming to Canada with somewhere to go. Very few people in Canada, sorry, of that 12,000, very few people of the 12,000 are randomly matched people who just pick Canada as the place they want to go. Virtually all of them have a tie to Canada, and that's how they've gotten here so quickly. Once they're here, Sabine's right, the federal government has not provided any social supports to these refugees. They won't even call them refugees, which means that the provinces have had to step up. And so you saw the provinces kind of holding back for the first few weeks. Are the feds going to do something? Aren't they going to do something? And Ontario, obviously, the biggest province in the country, yesterday or the day before, sometime this week, they announced an allocation of $300 million to support Ukrainian refugees or displaced persons coming to Canada. That means healthcare coverage, pharma coverage. It means income support, temporary shelter, mental health support, job placement support. All of those things are great. But again, those refugees have to get here to be able to access them. And there are still so many hurdles that the federal government could fix that they're choosing not to.
Andy, one of the things Sabine pointed out is that this is a temporary program. It gives people 3 years in Canada, and then what? Can they apply to stay longer in Canada? Could they claim asylum in Canada? Is that an option?
Yeah, there are programs that you can transition to from this program. An example might be the Canadian Experience class, where if you have 1 year of experience in a high-level working environment, you could apply to get permanent residence. Another could be claiming refugee status. That is a possibility. There are others. You could start studying something and then move from studying to a work permit and ultimately a permanent residence in Canada. So it is possible to transition. That part is good about what exists in terms of once you arrive. And thankfully, like Larissa mentioned, the holes pertaining to supports are being filled by the provinces, Ontario naming one, to name one. Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan have also declared they have programs. So in a sense, once the people have arrived and once these programs are up and running, because a lot of it is still in process, once they're up and running, it appears that there will be ways for people who want to stay longer to be able to adjust or change their status to be able to stay.
Sabine, one of the things we've been talking a lot about is the struggles in getting them here in the first place, though. So how can people who are in Ukraine get information about making their way to Canada? How do they access those immigration services if, for example, they're in a refugee camp and don't have a phone or documentation?
Usually refugees if in a formal camp can actually reach out to somebody that's working there from the United Nations. They'll have that information for them. They'll guide them through that process. It's not clear cut. It's very difficult, especially when you're fleeing without all of your documents. There's some red tape that you have to get through a lot of the time. And that's unfortunate. All of this is supposedly accessible over the internet, but as you can imagine, the internet is not that accessible. But if you can get a hold of somebody who's working in an official capacity, that's one way to do it. As for after they arrive here, settlement services, that's something that they have to also seek on their own. So I really encourage them to do that when they arrive in Canada.
We've got to go to commercial break, but we will be right back.